So what's up, man? We got another video. We got the worst Disneyland deaths by my boy Painful Explainer, man. Shout out my boy Painful Explainer, man. Let's get into it,
The
man.
magic.
I
Deborah
only went to Disneyland probably like I don't know which one is which, bro. But I know I went to Disneyland, the one with I think they both I don't remember, bro. I know I went to the one in Florida though.
Gail
Whichever
Stone
one's in
was
Florida.
18 years old when she started
She
her
was
dream
18?
job as a hostess at Disneyland's America Sings attraction in
Bro.
1974. The ride was a rotating theater showcasing the history of American music through animatronic characters. Guests sat in a moving outer ring that rotates to different scenes, while the inner section was stationary. Between
Back
each
when I used
scene,
to go,
large
I was
walls were
younger,
moved,
so I
creating temporary darkness as the
didn't
next
get on
set
that
appeared.
shit.
On July 8th, just 2 weeks after the attraction opened, Deborah was stationed between the stationary wall and one of the rotating platforms. Her job was simple: guide guests and ensure the show ran smoothly. What wasn't simple was the engineering flaw that would turn deadly. The gap between the moving and stationary walls was just 12 inches at its narrowest point, a space that left no margin for error. At approximately 10:30 p.m., as one scene transitioned to the next, something went wrong. Deborah became caught in the narrow space as the massive wall began its rotation. Security cameras didn't cover this backstage area. There was no emergency stop button within her reach. The hydraulic system powering the rotation exerted thousands of pounds of pressure, designed to move regardless of minor obstructions. Guests in the theater heard screams coming from behind the walls. Many assumed it was part of the show's sound effects. The walls continued their mechanical movement, crushing Deborah between them with inexorable force. The compression was catastrophic. Her ribcage collapsed first, puncturing her lungs and heart. Within seconds, the pressure fractured her spine and pelvis. By the time other cast members realized something was wrong and stopped the ride, it was too late.
Stop it? Like the people that were doing the ride, they didn't hear and stop it. Like if they heard screaming, they know that's not a part of the show.
When maintenance workers finally separated the walls, they found Deborah's body grotesquely flattened, blood pooling on the floor beneath her. Medical examiners later determined she remained conscious for nearly 40 seconds, as her body was slowly crushed, experiencing excruciating pain before death finally came. The next day, America Sings reopened with new safety lights and proximity sensors. Deborah's death became a grim reminder of the machinery behind Disney's magic. The derailment disaster.
RP to Deborah, bro.
Marcelo Torres was 22 years old when he visited Disneyland with friends on September 5, 2003. The California native chose to ride Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, one of the park's signature attractions. The Gold Rush-themed coaster was designed to simulate a runaway mine train. Reaching speeds of 30 miles per hour as it twisted through artificial caverns and desert landscapes. Torres settled into the front row of the first passenger car, directly behind the locomotive. What Torres couldn't know was that maintenance crews had been performing improper repairs on the ride for months. The previous night,
so why are they open? That's the company's fault.
Mechanics had replaced a critical wheel assembly, but failed to install a required safety wire that would keep the axle in place.
That's why I shouldn't be doing this type of stuff, because one mistake you can get sued for, hurting people. People could die.
No supervisor had checked the work. As the train climbed the third lift hill, the unwired axle began to work loose from its housing. At 11:22 a.m., as the train crested the hill and began its descent, the front locomotive's undercarriage violently separated from its chassis. Metal screeched against metal as the cars behind it, still moving at full speed, slammed into the derailed engine. The first passenger car, where Torres sat, bore the brunt of the impact. The locomotive's weight crushed inward, compressing the space where Torres was seated. The collision fractured Torres's chest and ribs with such force that bone fragments punctured his heart and lungs. He remained conscious as blood filled his chest cavity, each breath becoming more difficult than the last. Medical examiners later found that Torres did not die instantly, but suffocated over approximately 2 minutes as his lungs collapsed. Nearby passengers, many with broken bones and facial lacerations, watched helplessly as he struggled to breathe. When paramedics finally reached the scene, they found Torres still strapped in his seat, his body contorted by the crushed compartment. Blood had soaked through his clothing and pooled on the ride's track below. His friends seated just behind him had
I feel like they should start having medical, paramedics and stuff ride the ride.
Suffered only minor injuries, a difference of mere inches between life and death.
That way some goes
The boy who fell from the mountain. Mark Maples was 15 years old when he visited Disneyland with his family on January 3, 1964. The Matterhorn bobsleds had been operating for nearly 6 years by then, thrilling guests with its 80-foot drops and sharp turns that simulated an alpine adventure.
Yeah, I couldn't ride no ride like this, bro.
The steel-tracked ride, themed after Switzerland's iconic mountain, was the first tubular steel roller coaster in the world. Mark and his friend boarded a bobsled car in the afternoon, securing the simple lap belt that was the ride's only restraint system. As the bobsled climbed the initial lift hill, Mark was visibly excited. Other passengers in nearby sleds later reported that he had been daring his friend to raise their hands during the drops. The cars reached the top of the first hill, preparing for the signature plunge that made the ride famous. What happened next occurred in just seconds. At the crest of the hill, as the bobsled began to
Didn't they
pick up
say he was
speed,
15 years old? Shouldn't he have like he was like I don't know how roller coasters work. No more, I ain't gonna lie. I haven't been to a roller coaster like place in like years, bro. I ain't gonna lie. But don't you gotta like I know you gotta be a certain height, but don't you have to be like accompanied by somebody if you aren't a certain age?
Mark suddenly stood up. Whether it was a moment of teenage bravado or a misunderstanding
It's like
about
if
the
he's
ride's
15.
mechanics remains unknown. The
Why
physics
is
were
he
unforgiving.
by himself?
As the sled pitched downward at 20 miles per hour, Mark lost his balance. His center of gravity shifted
Damn.
forward, and the momentum pulled him completely out of the vehicle. Mark fell approximately 30 feet before striking the steel track below. Primary
Hit his
impact was
head?
to his skull, causing an immediate depressed cranial fracture. Bone fragments were
Damn.
driven deep into his frontal lobe. Though the brain damage was catastrophic, death was not instantaneous. Medical examiners later determined that Mark remained alive for at least 2 minutes after impact, his breathing shallow and irregular as his brain began to swell inside his shattered skull. Ride operators found him splayed across the track, still conscious but unable to move or speak. Blood pooled beneath his head, running down the manufactured mountainside in thin rivulets. By the time the park's medical team arrived, Mark had slipped into a deep coma. He was transported to a nearby hospital where, despite emergency surgery to relieve the pressure on his brain, he died 3 days later without ever regaining consciousness.
RP to Mark, man. Y'all make sure y'all stay safe on these roller coasters.
Decapitated on the slopes,
What?
Dolly Regine Young was 48 years old when she visited Disneyland in
48?
January 1984. The Matterhorn bobsleds had been
There's no like age limit on roller coasters.
one of the park's signature attractions for decades, and Dolly was eager to experience the Alpine-themed coaster again.
Yes,
The
everybody
ride
can have
featured
fun.
toboggan-style vehicles that raced through an artificial mountain at speeds approaching 30 miles per hour. Each three-person bobsled was equipped with seatbelts, but ride operators didn't always verify they were fastened.
Yep.
On January
That's
3rd,
the,
Dolly
what's it
boarded a
called?
bobsled in the early afternoon. Whether she forgot to secure her seatbelt or it was improperly latched remains unclear. The ride began normally as her sled climbed the initial chain lift to the top of the mountain. At first, everything seemed fine. Then, as the vehicle navigated a sharp turn halfway through the ride, disaster struck. The bobsled hit a particularly rough section of track known for its jarring bumps. Dolly, without the security of a fastened seatbelt, was jolted upward. The momentum of the speeding vehicle combined with the centrifugal force of the turn was enough to lift her completely out of her seat. In an instant, she was thrown from the bobsled onto the cold metal track, her body splayed across the rails. For approximately 4 seconds, Dolly lay on the track, possibly conscious and
what do you
aware of her
even do in this
predicament.
situation?
Then came the sound of the next bobsled,
Oh,
already descending the
so-
mountain just 20 seconds behind
Nobody's
hers.
seen this
The
happen?
oncoming vehicle had no time to stop. Its steel undercarriage struck Dolly's upper body with tremendous force.
Damn.
The impact severed her neck almost completely, leaving her head attached by only a few tendons and blood vessels.
Yo,
Blood sprayed across the white artificial snow, creating a ghastly contrast that would later haunt the ride operators who discovered her. The bobsled that struck her derailed partially, stranding its passengers above the grisly scene.
Damn.
Those riders reported hearing a sickening sound, part thud, part crack, as their vehicle
That was
hit what they initially thought was a piece of the ride's scenery. When emergency responders arrived, they found Dolly's body wedged beneath the derailed bobsled, her head twisted at an impossible angle. The coroner later determined that death was mercifully quick, resulting from immediate trauma to the spinal cord and massive hemorrhaging. The
RP to Dolly,
Town
bro.
tragedy.
Where's her family?
Brandon Zucker was 4 years old when he visited Disneyland with
years
his
old.
parents on September 22, 2000. The Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin ride had been operating in the park's Toontown section for 6 years. The
That looks
attraction
remind me of
featured
Candyland.
spinning cartoon taxicabs that moved along a track through colorful scenes. Each vehicle could rotate 360 degrees as it progressed through the ride, controlled by a steering wheel inside the cab. Brandon, an energetic preschooler with bright eyes and
Dude,
brown
driving
hair,
it?
sat in the same cab as his mother.
Okay.
The ride began normally as their yellow taxi entered the first scene. The vehicle spun gently as Brandon's mother turned the wheel. About halfway through the attraction, as the cab made a sharp turn, something went terribly wrong. The small opening between the bottom of the cab door and the ride floor was approximately 7 inches, just large enough for a child's body to pass through. In a moment of excitement or imbalance, Brandon slipped down from his seat. Before his mother could react, he slid through the gap beneath the door. The vehicle's momentum dragged him immediately under the moving cab. The
Damn.
metal undercarriage, weighing over 700 pounds, rolled over Brandon's small body. The crushing force caused catastrophic compression injuries to his chest and abdomen. Most devastating was the oxygen deprivation to his brain, which began the moment his chest was crushed. For approximately 3 minutes, Brandon remained pinned beneath the taxi as the ride continued to operate. Other guests heard his mother's screams but couldn't understand what was happening in the darkened attraction. When operators finally stopped the ride and emergency personnel reached him, Brandon was unconscious. His pulse was faint, his breathing almost imperceptible. Paramedics performed CPR as they rushed him to the hospital. Brandon survived the initial trauma but had suffered irreversible brain damage. For the next 9 years, he remained in a persistent vegetative state, kept alive by feeding tubes and constant care. His body grew, but his mind never recovered. Medical experts explained that each day, his brain cells continued to die from the original injury. On January 26, 2009, at age 13, Brandon's body finally succumbed to pneumonia, a direct complication of his bedridden condition. The official cause of death was listed as complications from anoxic encephalopathy, brain damage caused by oxygen deprivation nearly a decade earlier. Christmas Eve catastrophe. Luan Fee Dawson was 33 years old when he visited Disneyland with his family on December 24, 1998. The holiday crowds filled the park as Dawson, his wife Lu Tui Vuong, and their daughter gathered near the sailing ship Columbia attraction. The Columbia was a full-scale replica of an 18th century sailing vessel that circled the rivers of America. The ship, weighing over 110 tons, was secured to the dock by heavy rope. The ship, weighing over 110 tons, was secured to the dock by heavy ropes attached to metal cleats bolted into the wooden deck. At approximately 6:15 p.m., as guests were boarding for the next journey, a cast member attempted to secure one of the mooring lines. The rope being used was not the specified marine-grade nylon, but a cheaper, less flexible polyester substitute that had been installed during recent maintenance.
Yeah, bro.
As the mass
It's crazy how like people could really just do that just by not wanting to really care.
The ship
about
pulled
that.
against its
I mean,
moorings. The rope
safety
suddenly went taut with
and
over
not wanting
2,000
to
pounds
go
of
out that way to do
pressure.
that.
The strain proved too much for the substandard material. With a sound like a rifle shot, the rope snapped. The released tension sent the heavy metal cleat flying through the air at nearly 100 miles per hour. The 8-pound brass fixture became a deadly projectile, ripping free from its mounting bolts and spinning wildly toward the crowd of waiting guests. Dawson had no time to react. The metal cleat struck him directly in the skull, just above his right temple. The impact crushed his cranial bone inward with such force that bone fragments penetrated 3 inches into his brain. The traumatic injury severed blood vessels and destroyed critical brain tissue instantly. Neurologists later explained that while death was not immediate, consciousness was lost within milliseconds, as intracranial pressure spiked catastrophically. Blood poured from the wound as Dawson collapsed onto the festively decorated dock. His wife, standing just beside him, was also struck by the projectile as it ricocheted. The cleat tore through her cheekbone and jaw, leaving her critically injured but alive. Their young daughter watched in horror as both parents fell. Emergency medical technicians reached Dawson within minutes, but the injury was unsurvivable. Despite being rushed to the nearby UC Irvine Medical Center, he was pronounced dead at 8:48 p.m. Just as Christmas Eve celebrations around the park were reaching their peak, his death marked the first guest fatality at Disneyland directly attributable to mechanical failure rather than guest behavior or pre-existing medical conditions. People Mover Tunnel
RP Dawson Bishop's family. Hopefully the wife got better too. And the kid doing great.
crush. Ricky Lee Yama was 17 years old when he visited Disneyland on a warm August day in 1967.
What?
The People Mover attraction, which had opened just the previous
I don't
year,
know.
was a
I mean, it might have been a long time ago, so I
futuristic
don't know if
transportation system that
Yeah, but-
offered guests a leisurely journey
You get
through
what I mean,
Tomorrowland. The ride consisted of small 4-person cars that moved continuously along an elevated track at a steady 5 miles per hour. There were no doors on the vehicles, just
No
open
doors.
sides that allowed guests to easily enter and exit at the loading platform. Ricky was with friends that afternoon enjoying the park's attractions. Witnesses later reported seeing the teenagers engaging in horseplay near the People Mover, possibly daring each other to jump between moving cars. This dangerous activity wasn't uncommon among thrill-seeking teens, despite clear warnings against it. As the train of connected cars entered a dark tunnel section near the Adventure Through Inner Space attraction, Ricky made his fateful decision. With his friends watching, he leapt from the platform toward a
Whenever
moving car.
like a lot of people were like, I know he was young, but just don't allow people to make you do this. Things like
The
this.
gap between cars was only 18 inches, seemingly easy to cross. But Ricky mistimed his jump. His foot caught the edge of a car, causing him to lose balance. He tumbled downward, falling directly onto the moving track below. The fall itself wasn't far, just 4 feet, but the consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Before Ricky could regain his footing in the darkened tunnel, the next train of People Mover cars rounded the bend. The front edge of the first car struck his body, knocking him flat against the track. The undercarriage, with its wheels and mechanical components, passed directly over him. The weight of the car crushed his ribcage, puncturing his lungs and heart, but death didn't come instantly. As Ricky lay injured on the track, unable to move, additional cars continued to pass over him. Each one
Damn.
inflicted new trauma to his already broken body. The ride's mechanical
And
system,
that shit
designed
just
to move
doesn't stop.
continuously,
Oh,
dragged
me
him along
there.
the track for approximately 340 feet through the dark tunnel. Other guests, seated in cars passing through the same tunnel, heard his screams but couldn't see what was happening in the darkness below. When ride operators finally received word of a
I
problem
ain't hear
and
no
stopped the
screaming.
attraction, emergency responders found Ricky's body mangled beyond recognition. The medical examiner later determined that he had remained conscious for at least 40 seconds after the initial impact, experiencing the full horror of being crushed and dragged before blood loss and organ damage finally ended his suffering. Monorail track
RP to Ricky, man. Y'all make sure y'all make good decisions, man. First issue.
trespass. Thomas Guy Cleveland was 19 years old on June 7, 1966, when he attempted to sneak into Disneyland during the park's annual
Sneak
Grad
in
Night
is crazy.
celebration. The special after-hours event was restricted to
Alright.
Disneyland during the park's annual Grad Night.
Mission design and unlimited use of all rides and attractions. It's only $7. June 16th, 11 p.m. to 5 in the morning is insane though. 6 hours photo.
Celebration. The special after-hours event was restricted to high school graduates with valid tickets, which Cleveland did not have. Determined to join his friends inside, he devised a plan to bypass the main entrance. The Disneyland Hotel sat just outside park property, separated from Tomorrowland by a 16.
Okay, it's just a ride.
Disneyland Hotel sat just outside park property, separated from Tomorrowland by a 16-foot security fence topped with barbed wire. Around 1 o'clock a.m., Cleveland
Y'all
scaled
found
this
over barbed
imposing
wire?
barrier, ignoring the clear warning signs posted along its length. The teenager successfully cleared the barbed wire and dropped down onto what appeared to be an empty service road. What he failed to realize was that he had landed directly on the Disneyland Allweg monorail track, an elevated concrete beam that carried the futuristic trains between the hotel and the park. Cleveland began walking along the narrow beam toward Tomorrowland. The concrete track was only 32 inches wide,
Yeah, his
leaving little
homeboy
room
can't
for
just allow him
error.
to get,
A
like,
security guard
sneak on the-
spotted him and immediately
What's it
shouted
called?
warnings to get down. Cleveland either didn't hear or chose to ignore these calls. He continued forward, unaware that Monorail Red was approaching from behind at approximately 30 miles per hour on its regular late-night circuit. The train's operator spotted Cleveland too late to stop. The monorail, weighing several tons, struck the teenager with tremendous force. The impact shattered his spine and fractured his skull instantly. His body was thrown forward but became caught beneath the front of the train. For approximately 70 feet, Cleveland was dragged along the rough concrete beam, his skin and clothing torn away by the abrasive surface. The friction created by his body against the track actually helped slow the monorail to a stop. When emergency responders reached the scene, they found Cleveland's remains wedged beneath the first car. Medical examiners later determined that while the initial impact caused catastrophic injuries, Cleveland had not died instantly. Blood evidence indicated his heart continued beating for nearly 2 minutes as he was dragged along the track, conscious enough to experience the excruciating pain of having his body systematically
homeboy
shredded
tried
by
to
the
fake it.
concrete. The nighttime
And
darkness
he
and the
got it
elevation
right
of the track meant that many guests inside the park remained unaware
Yeah, I
of the
feel like if you
tragedy
don't got a ticket, bro, just don't.
unfolding above them.
I'll
Cleveland's
risk the
death
whole crap.
occurred as graduation celebrations continued nearby. The juxtaposition of youthful celebration
They don't
and
even
grim
probably
mortality
know that he's. Oh, this is youthful. They don't even know that he came and this happened to him.
separated by
So
just a
after it
few
was
dozen
already too
feet
late.
of air. If you want to see more videos like
All right, well, everybody that was in here, man. Shout out Disneyland, man. Y'all made good decisions. Um, but you know, at some point you just gotta realize, like, guys, and girls being first love, say adjustments. Measurements to the movie park and coming home with generation of trauma. Yeah, I also want to do prayers to like the people who actually watch this too, like seeing this in person. Respect for them. Lord, just help everybody that was in this video to, make a recovery if they can. If not, just help their family be able to learn and other people to learn to not do these things. Just help their life be able to be celebrated in some way by their family and people that love them. But we love you, Lord. We're nothing without you. Just help us have a great rest of our day. And just your first thing, everything you do. In Jesus' name, we love you. In Jesus' name. All right, y'all stay safe, man. I love y'all. We got one more video today. Peace out, man. Make good.